The worst part about being called ugly is not the word itself. It's hearing it so many times. You start apologizing for your own face. My name is Faith. I'm 34 years old. And for most of my life, my family made me feel like something that needed to be hidden. In my family, everyone had a label. My brother, Ethan, was the smart one. My sister, Claire, was the beautiful one. And me? I was the difficult-looking one. They never said it directly at first. Not when I was little. Back then, it was softer. Crueler in quieter ways. Oh, Faith has such a nice personality. She's very creative. Beauty isn't everything. Children notice things adults think they hide well. I noticed how relatives paused when they looked at me, how they complimented Claire's eyes, and ignored mine, how people asked Ethan about school, while asking me to help clear the dishes. I noticed everything, especially my mother. She never called me ugly. Not exactly. But she brushed Claire's hair gently, while fixing mine quickly, while my pictures stayed in drawers. Small things. Tiny things. But tiny things repeated over years become beliefs. By 13, I avoided mirrors. By 16, I learned how to make myself smaller, quieter, less noticeable. And honestly, that made life easier for them. At family gatherings, Claire shined naturally. People gathered around her, complimented her dresses, her smile, her future. And I learned to disappear into corners. Faith's shy, my aunt would explain.
No.
Faith was trained to believe she was unwanted. The strange thing is, pain becomes normal after a while. You stop fighting it. You stop expecting warmth. You just survive it. But survival changes people. While my family focused on appearances, I focused on building a life outside of them. Books became my escape. Writing became my oxygen. Words didn't judge faces. Words cared about truth. So I wrote. Every night. Every lunch break. Every lonely moment. At first, it was private. Small essays. Observations. Thoughts no one cared enough to ask about. Then one article got published online. Then another.
And another.
Quietly, without telling my family, I became someone people read. Not famous. Not rich. But respected. Editors started contacting me. Publications started noticing my work. And for the first time in my life, people listened before they looked at me. That changes a person. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But slowly, you begin rebuilding the parts of yourself other people damaged. Still, I never told my family much. Because every time I shared something growing up, it somehow became smaller in their hands. Oh, that writing thing? That's cute. You should focus on something realistic. So, eventually, I stopped explaining myself.
It was easier that way.
Then came the reunion. Our annual family reunion was always exhausting. Too many people. Too many comparisons. Too many reminders of who I was supposed to be. I almost didn't go that year. But my mother insisted. People will ask where you are, she said. Not because she missed me. Because appearances mattered. So, I went. The reunion was held at my Aunt Linda's large house, near the lake. Same decorations. Same food. Same uncomfortable feeling in my chest. Claire arrived late, of course. And like always, the room shifted when she walked in. Oh my goodness, look at you. You haven't aged a day. She's stunning. Claire smiled gracefully, used to admiration,
Comfortable inside it.
and me? I carried a bowl of salad into the kitchen unnoticed. Some things never change. A few hours later, I stepped outside to breathe. The noise inside had become too much. That's when Aunt Linda appeared beside me. You could try harder, you know, she said suddenly. I blinked. What? With your appearance, she continued casually. As a woman, presentation matters. 34 years old. And somehow, they still found new ways to remind me. I was not enough. I smiled politely. Not because it didn't hurt. Because I was tired. Tired people stop arguing. Before I could respond, another car pulled into the driveway. A sleek black car. Elegant. Professional. A woman stepped out. Maybe in her 50s. Sharp coat. Confident posture. Warm eyes. I recognized her immediately. And suddenly, my heart stopped. Because standing in that driveway was Vanessa Cole, senior editor of one of the biggest magazines in the country. The woman who had been working with me privately for almost a year. The woman who had flown in personally for the biggest opportunity of my career. And my family had no idea. Aunt Linda frowned. "Oh," she muttered. "Must be one of Claire's connections." I almost laughed. Vanessa spotted me instantly. Her face lit up. She started walking toward us. But before she could speak, Aunt Linda stepped forward first. And then, she said the sentence I will never forget. Smiling politely at Vanessa, she gestured toward me and said, "This is the one we don't talk about." The words hit quietly. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But something inside me went completely still. Because after all these years, after all the pretending, after all the polite cruelty, there it was. The truth. Not hidden anymore. Not softened. Just spoken openly. I waited for embarrassment. For shame. For that familiar ache in my chest. But strangely, it never came. Because Vanessa looked at my aunt with visible confusion. Then she looked at me. And smiled. A real smile.
Warm. Proud. Certain.
"Oh," she said calmly. "You mean the writer everyone in New York is talking about?" Silence.
Instant.
Heavy. Absolute. And just like that, everything changed. The silence that followed felt different from every silence I had known before.
Not awkward.
Not dismissive. Uncertain. Because suddenly, the version of me my family had carried for decades no longer fit the room. Aunt Linda blinked twice. "I'm sorry, what?" she asked. Vanessa looked genuinely confused. "You do know who Faith is, right?" No one answered. And honestly, that told me everything. Vanessa turned toward me again. Warm smile. Completely unaware that she had just shattered 34 years of family hierarchy. "I've been trying to convince her to accept interviews for months," she said lightly. "She hates attention." My mother stepped closer. "Interviews?" she repeated. Vanessa nodded. "For her essays." Essays. Such a small word for something that had quietly rebuilt my entire life. Claire frowned. "What essays?" Vanessa stared at her now. Really stared. "You've never read her work?" The question hung in the air like exposed wiring. Dangerous. No one moved. No one spoke. Because the truth was simple. They had never cared enough to ask. Vanessa reached into her bag. Pulled out a magazine. Glossy cover. Elegant design. And there, printed beneath the headline, was my name. Faith Harper. My father took the magazine slowly. As if touching it too quickly might somehow make it disappear. "You wrote this?" he asked quietly. I nodded once. He flipped pages.
Stopped.
Read silently. His expression changed. Then changed again. Not disbelief anymore. Recognition. Because for the first time, he was seeing me through someone else's eyes. And outside of this family, I was not invisible. Vanessa smiled proudly. This article reached over 3 million readers. My mother's hand covered her mouth slightly. 3 million, she whispered. Claire quickly took the magazine next. I watched her eyes scan the pages faster and faster. Then she looked up at me. You never told us, she said. There it was again. That sentence people use when they suddenly discover value in someone they ignored before. I held her gaze calmly. You never ask. The room went quiet again. But this silence felt sharper. Because truth has edges. Vanessa looked around awkwardly now. I think she was finally beginning to understand what kind of family this was. She's extraordinary, Vanessa said carefully. The publishing world has been talking about her for months. Months. Not years. Months. And still, my family knew nothing. Because they never looked beyond the label they gave me as a child. The ugly one. Funny how labels survive longer than facts. My aunt forced a laugh. Well, goodness. We had no idea. I almost smiled. Of course they didn't. People rarely notice growth in the person they already decided to underestimate. My father continued flipping through the magazine. Then he stopped suddenly. His eyes narrowed. This photo, he said slowly.
Oh.
That photo. The professional portrait. The one taken for the feature article. Good lighting. Simple black clothes. Soft expression. I remembered hating it when they first showed me. Not because it looked bad. Because I wasn't used to seeing myself treated gently. My father stared at it quietly. And then, for the first time in my entire life, he said something I never expected to hear. You look beautiful. The room froze. Not because the words were dramatic. Because they were 34 years late. And somehow, that made them heavier. I looked at him carefully. And, for a second, I saw regret in his eyes. Real regret. The kind people feel when they realize they helped create someone's pain. My mother sat down slowly nearby. I don't understand, she whispered. You were doing all of this while working? I nodded. Yes. Why didn't you tell us? Again, that question, as if the problem was secrecy, instead of years of dismissal. I took a slow breath, because every time I tried to share something growing up, I said softly, someone made me feel small for it. No one interrupted. You taught me very early, I continued, that nothing about me was worth much attention. My mother's eyes filled with tears instantly. Faith. But I shook my head gently. Not angrily. Just honestly. I'm not saying this to hurt you, I said. I'm saying it because it's true.
Truth.
Quiet truth is harder to fight than shouting. Claire looked down at the magazine in her hands. I never thought, she began. I know, I replied softly. Because that was the problem. They never thought about how words settle inside people. How jokes become wounds. How labels become identities. Vanessa stepped closer beside me. You know, she said carefully, Faith writes some of the most emotionally intelligent pieces I've read in years. Emotionally intelligent. I almost laughed at that, because emotional intelligence is often born from surviving emotionally immature people. The reunion continued around us awkwardly, but the energy had changed completely. Relatives who barely spoke to me before suddenly wanted conversations. People smiled differently now, looked at me differently, as if accomplishment had finally made me visible. And honestly, that hurt more than the insults ever did. Because respect should not arrive only after success. Real love sees value before applause does. A few hours later, the sun began setting over the lake. People slowly packed leftovers. Children ran across the yard. And for the first time, I realized something surprising. I didn't feel angry anymore. Just finished. Like a chapter quietly ending. My mother approached me near the porch steps. I'm sorry, she whispered. Simple words, but fragile. I looked at her tired face, and I believed she meant it. But sincerity doesn't erase history. I know, I said gently. Tears rolled down her cheeks. We failed you. That sentence hurt in a completely different way, because deep down, I had spent my entire childhood waiting to hear someone admit it. My father joined us slowly. I thought toughening you up would help you, he admitted quietly.
No.
It taught me loneliness. But I didn't say that. Some truths don't need cruelty attached to them. Instead, I smiled softly. And that was enough. Claire walked outside last, magazines still in her hands. You really did all this alone? She asked. I looked out at the lake. The fading sunlight. The peaceful water. Yes. She nodded slowly. And for once, there was no competition in her voice. Only realization. You were never the ugly one, she whispered. I looked at her quietly, then finally said the thing I wish I had understood years earlier. I know. Not defensive. Not emotional. Just certain. Because healing sometimes arrives quietly. Not as revenge. not as victory, but as the moment. Someone else's opinion finally loses permission to define you. That night, I left the reunion early. Not dramatically. No grand exit. Just peace. A message from Vanessa. You okay? I smiled slightly, then replied, better than okay. And for the first time in my life, I truly meant it, because the little girl who spent years hiding from mirrors had finally learned something important. Worth is not created by the people who failed to see it. Sometimes, your value exists completely outside the room you grew up in. And sometimes, walking away peacefully is the strongest thing a person can do.